All right. Everybody, welcome to the Mike Lead Aspirers class today. I'm Mary Cheney, Chairwoman and CEO of Minorities in Cybersecurity. We have with us today a guest speaker, but I just want to say thank you for those that are joining us on live stream, live, restream. Thank you. Like our page on YouTube and share it and leave comments if you want to leave comments about what we're trying to do. Again, our Mike Aspires program, or for those that are looking to get into cybersecurity. So we have guest speakers that come and talk about different aspects of cybersecurity that you may not think about. We will, and we do have a couple of great announcements coming up next month, but I won't spoil that. And I want to welcome Anthony Briscoe. And you know, I go back between Anthony and Tony. We did this last time.
I know, right?
We did your government name and stuff.
Right,
and
right.
You know, I know him as Tony. Tony is one of our leaders that graduated from one of our Mike Lead programs, Mike Lead Communicators. And so without further adu, giving a shout out to AWS, who's our sponsor. So if you haven't, if you didn't see it, you saw it. Yeah, there we go. We saw it.
Yeah, this CISSP thing is, you know, it may be AWS for the future. That's all I'm saying. Mary Cheney has her CISSP already, y'all, so she knows why I said that.
I have my CIPP as well, so you know.
I'm gonna be quiet. What she doesn't know yet, y'all, is I plan on cutting it short today so I can interview her, but we're gonna get that a little later.
Okay, all right. Well, I am here, but I'm gonna go off camera and leave this up to you.
Awesome.
And you can go ahead and get started. Today's conversations about ethical considerations and the things that we do here in cybersecurity. So there you go.
All right. Thank you, folks. It is great to be amongst you again. Again, my name is Tony Briscoe, Anthony Briscoe, whichever you prefer. I'm going to share my screen with you all again, hoping you all can see that. And great to be here. I am from the Mike Lead Communicators, Cohort 1. And today we're going to be talking about ethical considerations for cybersecurity professionals. So yes, for those of you who are aspiring to be in cybersecurity, ethics is all around cybersecurity, so you'll need to be ready for that. A bit about my background. I've been in IT for quite some time now. My first 16 years was all desktop support. If you've been in IT for any amount of time, you know that that's kind of cake work and cake duty, and eventually stepped over into some project management and 8 years in IT leadership experience at the senior director level. So yes, I am watching budgets all day, having meetings and doing QoS and service management. So that's my portfolio of 18 campuses and 2 satellites that I deal with on a daily basis at a wonderful charter school network here in Chicago called Noble. That's no secret. You can look at my LinkedIn profile and see it, so I don't mind sharing the name. A little bit about me. For those of you, I encourage everyone to go and watch the previous 2 weeks ago session on cybersecurity and purpose and how that purpose lines up with your work in cybersecurity. I hope you check that out. Please don't forget things that I do. I talk loud, so turn your mics down. As always, I'm a poet, I'm an author, I'm an IT and life mentor, consultant, and MC. And I have to tell you, I was moved last night. I was moved last night because I was in a graduation event from a Catalyst cohort. I taught 5 consecutive classes on IT service management, and I taught on help desk analysis and cost centers and what the cost implications are for organizations to hire people. One of the young men in this graduating class said, I learned so much from Mr. Briscoe, teaching me how to be professional on the phone, how to answer and respond to callers who are irate and those who call in with a lot of knowledge and want to dictate and tell you what to do when they call in. That really moved me. It's why I'm in this mentoring work, because I love it. It's why I'm a part of the Minorities in Cybersecurity. Mary, you're gonna need to send me a link to my renewal too. Thank you for that. So Mike Expirers are defined as those professionals looking to get into cybersecurity space, whether they are in college graduates, or transitioning. That is from our wonderful CEO. So let's get down to ethics. I want you to imagine you're in a meeting with your team and you're all doing group chat because we're excited about the kickoff of the year. And we're going to do great things. We're going to really be excited. We're going to be off the charts this year. We're going to really give great service. And then one of your team members drops into the chat, "Let's get this money," with a picture of a little girl brushing her hair with somebody peeking through a door. Now, I want you to emphasize on where I have arrows right now, because that is the response from my leadership team when they saw this chat. You can see eyes who are like, "Oh my goodness." You see cuss words. I think one of those was mine, actually. And you see somebody like, "What exactly are you representing here?" Best intention does not negate impact and ethics. Now, I know he did not mean anything by this, but the fact that I had 16 of my team members blow me up within 5 minutes of seeing this being posted by someone sent a very resounding message that this was inappropriate. Now, it's not about me knowing he didn't mean anything by it. It's explaining to him, "Hey, you upset quite a few people. So we're going to have a meeting on Wednesday. I want to first walk you through the process of how you see how this looks. And then I want you to be able to also address the team, because right now you're not looking good to them." The ethics behind cybersecurity professionals is very important. And we have to be very cautious and very cognizant of any message or image that we put out. This does include our social media feeds. A lot of companies, be ready for this, have social media policies on what you can and cannot say. It's a part of that employee package when you sign off on it. So you can't say you didn't know. Take the time to read your standard operating procedures. Take the time to read your employee agreement, because these things have a major impact in how you conduct business and what you do. So where do these ethics come from? They come from all over the place. As you enter into cybersecurity, you're going to see a whole lot of laws that apply to security. Computer and Fraud Act, these things date back quite some time. I'm not going to get into the specifics of those because I'm studying for the CISSP, and I'll try to show off and haul off this stuff that I'm still learning, and it will not make any sense to you. What I want you to be aware of, though, Mary is a CIPP and she's a CISSP. So I do want you to see the ethics for those who get this, who are going for or pursuing in your career in cybersecurity. The CISSP has a code of ethics, has a preamble that goes with it. So I don't want to bore you with a lot of reading on screen because I don't like doing that, but I want you to pay close attention to these words: the safety and welfare of society and the common good, duty to our principles and to each other require that we adhere and we be seen to adhere to the highest ethical standards of behavior. Therefore, strict adherence to this code is a condition of certification. Yes, this comes directly from ISC2.org. So, a CISSP who's certified. When I get certified, and if Mary Cheney finds me in violation of any of these ethics, if I remember 15 questions from this exam that I have coming up this year, and I post those 15 questions online, if Mary Cheney sees that, she is authorized to report me, and that can jeopardize my license. Your license for CISSP can only be contested by those who are already CISSP professionals. And so keep that in mind. There are always ethics surrounding it. Our role and our duty is to protect society, the common good, necessary public trust and confidence, and the infrastructure. Act honorably, honestly, justly, responsibly, and legally. Provide diligent and competent service to principals and to advance and protect the profession. I made my own acronym for the exam called PAPA. So there you have it. That's what this is all about, our ethics. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. And before we get too much into that, I do want to deal with this. The advancement of artificial intelligence has changed the landscape of what people are considering ethical and non-ethical. I'll make two statements. One of those statements is artificial intelligence has been around for a long time. People have always had minor issues with it. I'll just say this. Nobody had issues with AI when it was looking at resumes. And I'll just say dissecting certain people with certain names or certain zip codes from that category. But now everybody's got a problem with AI. ChatGPT is taking over, and there are a lot of programs that are based off ChatGPT version 3 that have also incorporated AI into what they're doing. So I did want to point out Coded Bias is a Netflix movie I recommend for everyone to watch, so you can see the details and the formation and the regulations that don't exist around artificial intelligence and what's to come. This is the minorities in cybersecurity. And so I want to be clear to speak to those minorities who are in cybersecurity of the coded bias that we deal with on a daily basis. This is the purpose of the MiC Lead programs, from aspirers to builders to communicators, to give you an awareness and an alertness of when you're in this field, the things that you will run into, and to help you navigate those spaces. Ethics deal a lot with these spaces. So our ethics in cybersecurity, they're based off the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So we have a guideline and a premise for our ethics within the cybersecurity community. This is our guiding light, the CIA, not the Central Intelligence Agency, whose name may come up on another slide in a minute. So let's get to what we're going to be talking about today. You may see there in the shadow something called non-repudiation, and that's just to know that when you say you opened an email, you will not be able to deny that you opened that email, because certificates and digital signatures verify that you indeed did do it, unless your account has been compromised for somebody to impersonate you. Okay? So y'all know I missed the acronym, right? I have to always come in with something. Ethics in trust, transparent or transparency, human, inclusive, compliance, and security. These are the pieces that we're going to walk through, and I want you to take your time. I want you to look at these. I'm not going to move through these slides super quick because I want you to get a good glimpse of them in case you want to do a screenshot so you don't have to go back and listen and make another copy, though I always appreciate you going back to listen. Ethical considerations in our field. We have technical controls, administrative controls, and physical controls. These controls are all designed to safeguard the CIA triad. Each has its own framework designed to ensure that policies, standards, et cetera, are all adhered to. It's our responsibility. So you're not coming into a field that has not given you standards, that has not given you policies, and has not given you or equipped you with the regulations that you will need to follow, whether you be in the credit card industry, whether you be in the financial industry, whether you be in government infrastructure and have to understand what it takes to be a government vendor or a government contractor. All of these things are all dictated for us. A lot of governing bodies give us these things. You've got NIST.gov, that is one of those governing bodies that comes up with the risk management framework to give you an idea of those protocols that surround cybersecurity. I know we're dealing with ethics, but again, this is one big ecosystem, and you have to understand some aspects of it as you begin to get into this field. So why are ethics so important? Well, let's dive in. Let's talk about a situation that is known to the world, because it sent a shockwave through the cybersecurity industry last year. So let's deal with this. A former chief security officer of Uber Technologies, Joseph Sullivan, was convicted. You can look up the details on your own. I don't want to harp on the details. Mary is a lawyer, so I'll probably talk to her a little bit about this later on as part of the interview process that I want to have with her. But Mr. Sullivan was not walking in integrity. Mr. Sullivan was walking in confidentiality, but it wasn't the right confidentiality. He was walking in an integrity, but not the integrity that goes with the law. He ends up getting convicted. The last statement, The evidence demonstrated that shortly after learning to the extent of the 2016 breach, and rather than reporting it to the FTC and other authorities or Uber's users, Sullivan executed a scheme to prevent any knowledge of the breach from reaching the FTC. You can read the rest there and you kind of get a feel for where this is going. A former chief security officer. So before we lay judgment, I want to lay out a few foundations about the ethics of this and cover-ups and how we deal with them. Now, we know there are always cover-ups, right? I'm in Chicago Police Department. Trust me, I understand cover-ups. That's not saying that all officers are bad, so please don't twist my words. I have friends at my church who are police officers. So it's important of this acknowledgement, and that's because of Mr. Sullivan's background. He was a former assistant U.S. attorney for the Northern District of California. He was also, as recorded by someone who works in the UK Serious Fraud Division, Miss Judy Kay, that he was also a founding member of the Computer Hacking and Intellectual Property Unit at the Northern District of California. So the penalty or the weight, he's not sentenced yet, but the weight for him to walk in this violation was pretty tremendous. For him to be convicted, and for him to be convicted alone, that's what kind of shook the community up, because we're like, wait a minute, I'm studying for the CISSP. Miss Cheney already knows where I'm going. I thought that senior leadership was responsible for this, so why is he the only one? And there could be a lot of details that I can't get into with the short time that we have here. But it did send a message for those who are in chief security officer positions, information security officer positions, or those who are chief information, CISOs, CSOs, ISSOs. It's to say that now there's a layer of accountability that directly impacts us that may not impact those who we work for, who we're acting on behalf of. That means the organization or the company. Now, I work in the education field. I am bound by quite a few laws, from FERPA, SIPA, COPA, SOPA, HIPAA. There are few laws that I'm bound by in my role that's regulatory. A violation of those could put me in a precarious situation like Mr. Sullivan if I choose to violate those willfully and knowingly. There's the difference. It's important to also know what the community said about him in this trust factor of entrusting. It says Mr. Sullivan worked as a cyber crime prosecutor. There's no excuse for him not following the law. This is what the community is saying on LinkedIn. I did not put the people's name next to this. That's why I have them in quotes. Someone said this is also going to change the landscape of the CISO role across the board. This has extreme negative impacts, then it has some positive ones. It does, because no CISO wants to take the weight of responsibility for facing jail time. Now, there was, in this case with Mr. Sullivan, there was supposed to be a Bitcoin payout of $100,000. I don't know how any CISO gets access to $100,000 in Bitcoin without a chief executive officer sign off and without a chief financial officer sign off. But regardless of those things, regardless of those events, this is what it led up to. So yes, people who are in those higher positions are bound by ethics and they have to obey the law. I believe this was also sending a message to Mr. Sullivan directly and to anyone else who's thinking about doing a cover-up after you are breached. There's an ethical responsibility to let your user community know what is happening when there is a breach. There's a specific timeline of 30 days for some, 15 for others, where you have to turn these things around. And so another comment I do want to mention on here is definitely not justifying his actions. What I'm saying, it takes a lot of strength to go against the consensus. What does that mean? We're going to talk about what that means, but in detail. Tony, why are you showing this slide again? Because I want you to see what I have in the middle of this slide. Human. Human. That is us. In cybersecurity, the greatest weakness is considered humans. There are times when we are threats. That's why laws are written. Now, I am not into saying that laws dictate morality. They don't, but they're sent there. They're created to help people be ethical. For instance, I was told last year sometime, Tony, if you really want to keep a good posture on your job, you're going to need to cut your hair again, because right now you're growing braids and you're never really going to be considered in advance. Now, let me be clear. No one at my job told me that. This was a family friend, right? So what do we have in the country? The Crown Act that is supposed to say, hey, you cannot discriminate against someone because of their hair. Predominantly, I'm just going to say Black people, because we're the ones who really have nice hairstyles, fancy hairstyles, which really goes back to our roots in Africa. I just came back from Ghana, so wanted to share that. But we couldn't get around this hump, always judged or always criticized for it. So in other words, that laws are created to make sure that people are getting their fair share of treatment. Minorities in cybersecurity exist for a reason. It's to help minorities advance in the field of cybersecurity. So people create organizations, lawmakers create laws in order to reinforce what the country should be doing naturally and morally to help push them along the way. But we are sometimes the weakest link. All right, so let's get down to being transparent as part of your ethics. Organizational values, personal ethics, moral values, and spiritual disciplines all play a role when we are employed. If you don't understand what I'm saying, I'm going to give you two names to research. Eric Snowden is one. Chelsea Manning is another. Chelsea Manning is an American citizen, Army veteran. I can't recall if they were honorably discharged or dishonorably discharged, but this was someone who turned over classified documents based on some happening overseas during the war that they thought were vital to national security, but were also violating the core beliefs of the United States government and the United States military. Eric Snowden should be a very famous name that you're familiar with. Eric Snowden was able to get through the ranks. He was part of the CIA, part of the NSA. Mr. Snowden uncovered some things that the government was doing. He did not find those things ethical. So Mr. Snowden turned those documents over to some news agencies who released some of this information. There's a really lot more details in there that you need to really read on, but I wanted to share that. Two names. There are going to be occasions ethically where your moral values do not stand with what your organization is doing. Now, I cannot tell you what to do or how to navigate these spaces. That's something you're going to have to know on your own. I will say this, for us, we don't have the opportunities that Mr. Snowden has. Mr. Snowden was able to get out of the country. Mr. Snowden was able to find harbor. Mr. Snowden was able to remain out of the country so he wouldn't get arrested while reporting. Now, I've talked to some military friends of mine who were in the intelligence industry who support what he did. They don't support the way he did it. Some people supported the way he did it. So we had interesting conversations in the military surrounding Eric Snowden. What I want to say is that there's going to be a time, especially for us who are minorities in cybersecurity and African American, our heritage is built on people who spoke what they believed and didn't have anywhere to flee. We couldn't flee anywhere. Sometimes you're going to have to stand your ground based on your belief and deal with the consequences of that. It's very etchy. It's very trying, depending on what you uncover. You can take Erin Brockovich and put her in that situation as well. But if there are some ethical violations going on and you feel like you could be threatened or something could happen to you because of retaliation, then it's probably best for you to walk away, but walk away in silence. The minute you decide to take data from any organization where you see discrepancies, the minute you decide to do that, you are in violation of the Espionage Act, and the United States government will come after you. So I want to be clear that in cybersecurity, this is not to scare you away from the field, because you'll find out that no matter what your job is, there are ethics that you probably don't know about, laws, rules, and regulations that apply to you. So I'm not trying to scare you away from this field and this industry. What I'm just trying to say that there will be times when your organizational values, your personal ethics, your moral values, or whatever your spiritual disciplines are, may come at a time where they conflict with your job. My old CIO he got his MBA program from Notre Dame. When he came back to the hospital, he resigned within 6 months. He called me to his office and said, I wanted to tell you first, based on the man that you are, I can no longer work for this organization based on what they're asking me to do with the books. And he resigned and he left. Whatever he learned at Notre Dame in his MBA program, it impacted him to enough where he resigned from his job without another job for a couple of months. He needed time for peace. He needed time to dissect the things that he had potentially done prior to that. And so ethics play a very important role in the cybersecurity profession. We are glued to them. They are glued to us. There's no way around them. There's no way to escape them. This is what we're called to do. We are called to be ethical. The reasons we're called to be ethical, well, that's the interesting part. Codes of behavior, cyber analytics. Now, I'm going to say a couple of terms, UBA and UEBA. That's user behavioral analytics and user entity behavioral analytics. Now, all of these are technically technical controls, right? You have what they call a SIEM that logs all of the traffic coming into your network and does monitoring for you, filters all these things in one central location. Typically, user behavioral analytics and user entity behavioral analytics, all of these are technical controls that are in place. I want to deal with the opposite end of this using those exact same terms of your behavior and administrative controls that are in place to kind of guide some of these behaviors. Job rotation, that's an administrative control. Separation of duties, that's an administrative control. Mandatory vacation, that's a administrative control. Dual control is an administrative control. Why am I bringing up these controls? I'm bringing up these controls because human behavior is always monitored and has to be monitored as part of ethics. There are some things that may be tempting to certain users that's not tempting to other users. I had to report a very close person that I know probably 15 years ago for some things that they had going on. I was sent in as a consultant to find out how pornography was getting into the system at a client. They sent me in to figure those things out. Now, I had no idea that this was me being a cyber analyst. I had no clue, but I was able to go in and find the information that they needed. And I had to present that information. I had to talk to the person who asked me, hey, did they ask you to investigate my computer? And I said, if you have any questions, sir, you need to talk to such and such. He was like, I'm going to ask you again. And I was like, I'm going to tell you again. If you're asking me any questions, you need to talk to such and such. Now, that did not end well for that person. I did not fear for my life. I let him know that I was not the right one to play with, but I had to do that in the right way as well. But people are concerned. They know they're being monitored. Some don't know they're being monitored. This is the reason these controls are in place for ethics. It goes back to that humans are the greatest weakness in cybersecurity. So ethically, you're going to have to do things that you can tell no one. I went to work for a firm. They let me go at the end of the day. They never should have hired me. It was the first time I heard the expression conflict of interest. It was a law firm that was actually shutting down a firm that I'd previously worked for. They were still liquidating that firm. So while they didn't do a background check on me for 3 months, it was a 3-month interview for a desktop role, y'all. It was a 3-month interview. Why they didn't do a background check? No idea. That morning, that afternoon, one of the partners saw my bio and was like, we never should have hired this guy. Why did we make this mistake? I'll just say 7.5 hours work, $10,000 paycheck, I can roll with that. It was all right. It was all good. But ethically, they could not allow me to stay within the organization. Why? Because I would have access to network data. Having access to network data means I could potentially go and dig up those files, and I would have never done that stuff. They could have just kept quiet. I never even knew that they were the firm liquidating this company. But ethics played a role. It cost me. Ironically, a friend of mine took that job and retired 20 years later. But, what can I say? Life goes on. Great firm. I really wanted to work for them. Drove me crazy. But in cybersecurity, these ethics, these behavioral analytics, everybody's being watched. And so if you're doing something out there at your job and all of a sudden they're noticing a pattern that over a pattern of 5 weeks, money was being ciphered out or documents were flowing out of the network. And then all of a sudden you go on vacation and they don't see this. And then when you come back, they see it again. It's going to be a red flag. They're monitoring human behavior because we are, again, one of the weakest links in cybersecurity. Those are not my words. You can look them up. You will find them on your own. Okay, let's talk about this inclusive function, this function of being inclusively exclusive. It sounds fancy, but it's not. What this means is there are going to be things that you have to share with the right people. There are going to be things you can't share with the wrong people. There are going to be things you may not want to share with the right people that you must, or you end up like Mr. Sullivan. And there are going to be things that you will want to share with the wrong person that you can't. In the military, we really call this a need to know. So after 9/11, I was called up, served on a naval security force in Great Lakes. I mainly worked in the office, but there were times if we had admirals or captains coming through the base, I had to go on security duty. So I had some very long work hours. And I don't know if you've ever been to Chicago in the wintertime, like Great Lakes, right off the lake, it's really cold. It's 28 degrees here today. And I was telling Mary, like, that's pretty warm. But when it comes to ethical considerations, I like to know my schedule in advance. And I could never know my schedule in advance. Sometimes I would not know exactly where they were assigning me and who they were assigning me with until it was time for me to go to the weapons locker and pick up my gear. So there's a need to know. And there's some things that I was just not privy to. And there were some things I did not want to be privy to that I became privy to that I had to keep my mouth closed about. I remember being in our captain's office, the base commander's office, excuse me, and he was talking to an agent. And the agent was like, "Who is this?" He's like, "Oh, that's Petty Officer Briscoe. He takes care of my computer needs. Well, I need him to leave. He's not going anywhere. He's going to stay in here." "Petty Officer Briscoe, have you heard any part of our conversation?" "So, no, sir. No, sir." Left it at that. FBI agent didn't say anything. My lieutenant commander didn't say anything. And I'm glad. I don't remember what they talked about that day. I just knew it was kind of heated at that time. But there's going to be information you're going to have access to that you simply cannot say anything. Why is this important? You're going to work for an organization potentially if you don't work for yourself and start your own cybersecurity business. You're going to get to know people at your job. You're going to become friends with people at your job. You're going to have access to information that you can never share with them. If a company's doing a layoff and you see their name on the list, you can absolutely not tell them. That's an automatic termination for you. You're going to be exposed to information that you have to keep absolutely private. One of the biggest parts you want to be aware of is when we make a mistake, we have to own it. Do not cover it up. It is not worth your job. It is not worth prison time. It is not worth a federal fine. It is not worth being blacklisted in this industry. It's cybersecurity. If you do something wrong, people are going to find out about it if you tried to cover it up. Don't ask me how, but it's cyber. So people will find out. Ethical considerations. Your function is a security professional, whether you're in the desktop, whether you're on a help desk, whether you are with the red team, whether you're with the blue team, whatever team you with, there are going to be things you can never reveal to the wrong people. If you do, it's not about you. It's about compromising the integrity of the organization. Now, if you want to watch a good show, I've been watching the series 24 again with Keith Sutherland. When I started cybersecurity, I started watching it with a completely different lens. I'm learning something new every time I turn that show on, because now I'm looking at this show, not from an excitement, I'm looking at this show from a professional standpoint, from a professional lens. Now I understand why everything was done in Unix and Linux on that show. Now I understand what CLI is. I understand what a command line interface is. Watching this show again is showing me all the ethics that are involved in this field. It's a TV show. I'm not saying everything there was real, but there are definitely some things and aspects to the show that if you start watching it again, watch it with a security lens. You will see the ethics behind the show and how Jack Bauer was a man who was all for America, but Jack did some crazy stuff when it came in conflict with his own personal ethics and his own personal values. So recommend you check that show out. But you are function and being inclusively exclusive. Need to know information. Please do not cover anything up. If you are asked to cover something up, it is time for you to pack your bags and walk away, because you should never be involved in a cover-up. It's just not good for business, and it will not be good for you in the long run. Okay? Compliance. We are governed by laws in cybersecurity. We are guided by regulations in cybersecurity. We comply, not with feelings. I want to be clear. Our ethics cannot be about feeling. Our ethics cannot be about instinct. Now, our feelings may be valid. Our instincts may be valid. But we cannot act on anything without a policy. Policies and compliance is what we do in cybersecurity. What do I mean by that? Oh, I think we need a vulnerability scan. Yeah, you're probably right. You do need a vulnerability scan. Well, I'm just going to have someone come out and do it. That's wrong. You can't do that. There's a legal side to that that has to be taken care of, and there has to be a sign-off by senior management. Now, I get it. I don't want to sit up here like I'm perfect, like I've done everything by the book over my career. I'm still known as a tactician. I believe in getting stuff done. I believe in executing well. And if you come from my organization, I will run through you with everything that is in me, because I work for Black and brown students, and we have work to do to get them through college, not just in college, through college. So if you're going to do something that's going to inhibit them, I'm probably going to come for you. Right? But again, that was me early on in my career. That was me going with feeling. That was me going with instinct. I'm working on being a policy man now. So I can't hold anybody on my team accountable for feelings. I can't hold anybody on my team accountable for instinct. What I can hold my team accountable for ethically is what policies we have in place that must be followed. That's the guideline. That's why we're here. We're here to understand what the organizational values are of the company. We're here to have an understanding of what stakeholders expect from us as clients, as investors. But at the end of the day, everything is dictated by policy, not by feeling, not by instinct. And if you feel that greatly about it, write a policy and see if senior level signs off on it. That's the only way you're going to be heard. The days of walking in and doing information technology as normal, they are over. Your ethics have to be so Trump tight. They have to be so strong. They have to be so consistent, but they have to be based on your organizational policies. Do you know how many people I talk to, who I mentor, who don't know what the mission statement is of their company? They don't even know who the CEO is. See, for me, when I come in, when I interviewed for the job that I've had now for 12 and a half years, I knew who the CEO was. I know who my boss was going to be. I knew where my boss lived. I knew how much he paid for his house. I did research. Every person who they gave me a name I'd have to interview with, it was a lot of long interviews, y'all. Trust me. I looked them up. I did research. I was on LinkedIn looking at profiles. I was doing Google searches. I was on Zaba search trying to find every bit of information that I could. I was on YouTube studying people. That's what I was doing to make sure I was locked in on the job. So when I met these folks, I wanted to see if the videos that they released lined up with who they say they were when I met them face to face. And some of them it was show, some of them it wasn't. But that's how deep I look into ethics. We have to dig real deep and make sure that we're in alignment. And when we go work for an organization, we should understand as much as we can about that organization before we get in bed with it. And I do mean in bed, because you're going to spend 8 hours a day to 10 hours a day with these folks and with this organization. You're going to be spending, if you're not remote, probably 2 hours traveling to and from. That means you're going to be spending a good amount of 50 to 60 hours with folks every day, 5 days a week. They become family, but you have to always draw an ethical line with everything. It's one of the things for you to consider in cybersecurity. You have to know your limits. You have to know what you're there for, and you have to know who you are when you get there. The S in ethics is for security. I'll share the slide again. This is what we are all about. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and non-repudiation. The human side of confidentiality goes just as well. Your words have to be confidential. Your availability when your organization needs you in a crisis, you have to be available. And you being upfront, you being direct, and you being personable, and you knowing how to communicate in these times of crises, all very serious. It's not complicated, but it is complicated because every organization has its own set of values. So don't just take the first opportunity that comes to you in cybersecurity if you're concerned about the ethics of it. I would just say, don't turn down any opportunity that comes to you in cybersecurity. You jump on it. And I'm not saying you got to stay there forever, but go in and learn how organizations function and how they flow and how they work. And make it an interview question. How is the company ethics? What's your governing body of ethics that you have as part of your organization? They should be able to answer that question. Now, your hiring manager may not know how to answer that question, but as you move through the interview process, your manager should know. Even if they say talk to legal, hey, then talk to legal. But the opportunities that are in cybersecurity are great. This is just one of the aspects that you'll need to know and understand when it comes to cybersecurity, and that is the CIA triad and the ethics that surround it. Remember, not feelings, not instincts, it's policy. MiC aspirers are defined as those professionals looking to get into cybersecurity space, whether they are in college, whether you are in college, whether you are in transition, whether you have completed college. That is a quote from Mary Cheney. MiC lead, leadership, education, advancement, and development, and our ABCs, aspirers, builders, and communicators. Ladies and gentlemen, that is my time. Thank you for this course sponsored by AWS, and I will bring in the wonderful Mary Cheney.
Hello, 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 hello. Now, you said something about an interview, right? Earlier that you wanted to do with us at this particular point in time.
Yeah, but I thought about it. Like, there's nothing you can share. Like, you're a lawyer and you're bound by confidentiality clauses. So,
well,
what would you say? And let's take the John Sullivan case for the former CISO of Uber. Like, it was clearly, as I dug into, it was clearly some things he violated. Clearly. My concern, because I'm that Philly person, was when did it only become the CISO responsible for this action? Because that's what I wanted to talk about. I get the violation, but everything that I'm learning in the CISSP, it doesn't exclude a CISO or a CSO or ISSO from penalties of violation. My concern was, where was the former CEO who signed off on a $100,000 Bitcoin deal? allegedly signed off. Let me correct myself. Allegedly signed off. Like that's why was he the only one that went down? That's what concerned me.
Well, most CISOs know that when there is a breach, that they're the ones that they're going to come from. That's why, typically CISOs have a 2-year shelf life, right? Because there are opportunities there, and someone worth their grain of salt that comes in and they want to make changes. Of course, they have to fight the battle of the internal politics that it takes to get something accomplished. And you could be a CISO, and I've had the situation where I've been in in job roles, and I'm screaming, look, fix this, fix this, fix this. Nope, we don't have the money. Nope, we don't have this. No, we don't have that. So I think, every CISO every higher executive knows when it comes down to a cybersecurity related issue, they're going to be looking at them. And it's like a handshake. It's like me taking this large role at a Fortune 500 company. I already know something goes wrong, even if it's in my first 90 days. If something goes wrong, they're coming for me, right? Because they're going to ask why I don't know. So you take that stress on in any organization, and you use that opportunity to set expectations in the door. Now, you go in the door and you say, look, there's a whole lot of stuff I don't know. I will take the time and I will figure it out. I will find the hot spots. I will put those hot spots on. However, we need to have a conversation about when this breach is going to happen, because it does. Because especially when you're dealing with a larger organization, there are so many different teams, so many disparate systems. They could be in the cloud. I mean, back in, when I was doing this stuff, it was on-prem, but now we have cloud infrastructure, and then it becomes it takes you a good 6 to 8 months just to figure out where everything is. Where are all the daggone bodies? However, there comes a point in time where you make a decision as a person in an executive role, like you pointed out earlier. There was a doctor, I believe, that you said, or a finance person that was working for the hospital, I think, that decided to leave as opposed to putting their ethics on the line. Yes. You have to stand for something. I've been working on my keynote for the conference here next month. And that's one of the things that I say. You have to make the decision of what it is you will and will not do, and then go, and be done with it, right? And so these regulations, these laws and regulations are coming out, and they are holding executives, even up to the CEO, accountable for not telling the truth. Now, let me tell you this. Companies have been lying for years. I said it. When it comes down to these cybersecurity breaches, I have watched attorneys, I'm an attorney, skate the rule of law, parse words to not report something, right? And then it becomes because there's a lot of people that go into making a decision, or when you are involved in any type of breach of information, and you are typically not the only one, even as the highest executive, as a CISO, not the only one making this decision. It's usually a business decision, right? Yes. And so there are a lot of people in the room, and if you haven't done that political schmoozing that you're supposed to do as an executive, and you're isolated, they're going to cut you. They're going to cut you. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge.
Do you think there's any, so I wish I could cite the report that I just read. I don't like saying things that I don't cite, but they were just talking about the scarcity that may be coming in the CISO role. Do you believe that AI will now play any role in part of these replacements of higher level security executives?
I don't think anyone that's going into cybersecurity, as our aspirers are, this is not going anywhere, because there is going to have to be a decision. Okay, And I'm going to go, because I was talking to the 8th graders, 7th and 8th graders yesterday. We're going to go to reality. Regardless, the machines aren't going to take over because there's always a person directing the machine.
Right.
Right. So I was talking about them in reference to investigating a crime for the FBI. There's always a person, and that person is always motivated. The tool that they use from a cybersecurity perspective, from a cybercrime perspective, determines, you can look at that tool that they're using to determine motivation. There's still an element. The robots and machines can do, I mean, you go ahead and clean that virus. You see the virus, go ahead. Yeah, we can automate that. Yeah,
right.
No, you don't need people to have that conversation. Yeah. But when it comes down to whether or not a machine makes the decision of whether to pay the Bitcoin or not, there is no company worth their grain of salt that's going to let the machine make that decision. There's still
Truth.
People. Truth. It's just even, if you're a military, you're a pilot, there are places that drones go, and there are places that you actually need a human, a person interacting with that, so because they could see different things, and it can come down to different things, and you have to be able to make a decision. A machine is going to make the decision based on what it was programmed to do. And don't get me started about the lack of diversity in creating these AI algorithms and that whole thing. We're not going to go there.
Have you seen Coded Bias?
No, I have not seen that movie. No.
And you better not watch Coded Bias this weekend, because based off the last statement you made, let's just.
I can guarantee you I will not, because I'm busy.
Not like you got a conference or anything coming up. You know what I mean?
It's not like I don't have anything to do, right? Yeah. And I have the MiC Lead Builders class tomorrow, so I can probably guarantee I will not be looking at Coded Bias. But the bottom line is, I don't need to watch it to know that's what exists. I mean, you can look at the sentencing guidelines, and they turned on AI for sentencing guidelines, and it was skewed against minorities. Absolutely. Black and brown people, because who's coding the algorithm? And so those are all things that, I talk to people about the diversity and what we're trying and what we are doing here at Minorities in Cybersecurity and with MiC Talent Solutions, is to get people involved and engaged in some of these things, so the decisions that are being made aren't skewed in one direction. Yeah. Awesome. I am not a young white male, as you can see. Therefore, my thought, and I'm a mother. Yes. And there are a lot of things based on my experience that the average male, not even white male, that me and the average male wouldn't have in common. A male with no children is not going to think about it in the same way as I would. And so the more diversity you have in the creation of these things, the better off you will be.
I agree. And that's why I brought up Eric Snowden, because Eric Snowden, our ancestors did not get to whistleblow and live or run or flee the country. Eric Snowden, he was able to do that. He was able to, he did it smart. He was not dumb in what he was doing. He did it really smooth. But even looking at his story of advancement, from going to a GED, from being a security guard to being a computer whiz, just the opportunities that availed themselves to him were just like astronomical.
That's fair. Nobody said it was fair.
Nobody said it was fair.
We just got to keep plugging through, right? I mean, those things that there's a lot of stuff that happens that I sit back and be like, that would never happen. We would never have the opportunity to defraud organizations or people out of millions of dollars and be okay and just be in the courtroom, right? Or flee to a place with no extradition. We just don't have those opportunities, but that doesn't mean that we don't have opportunities available to us that will allow us to now have our voices heard, which is what we're trying to do. It's getting involved and not taking this attitude, it's hands-off attitude that we don't have the right. It's encouraging our girls in STEM. It's encouraging our people of color, our inner city youth, our rural communities to go into different aspects of technology, because that's the one thing that you know, there are buku jobs, 755,000 last time I checked. Cybersecurity roles out there, and so they have to be filled by somebody. And don't sit back and think that you have no control. You can put in the work and the necessary work in this space to be able to change the outlook of your family, really, from a generational wealth perspective, just starting with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So.
Well, Mary Chaney, I thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to present to the MiC aspirers. You know, I love this space. Absolutely. 100%.
Yes.
Love
And
it.
thank you so much. Thank you so much. Everybody that's out there that's listening to us live now, who's watching this on our YouTube channel as we restream it or whatever. Thank you guys. And thank AWS for sponsoring this. We'll see you guys again in a couple weeks. Okay. Yeah. What's today? The 24th. Okay. My birthday is March 25th. So, you know, I tend to get a little shady when it comes to that. But I think I actually have Tanisha Martin coming up in March for the 10th and the 24th. So, you know, be on the lookout.
Get the penetration test ready.
Be on the lookout for her. Again, thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully, you know, you're getting something out of this. And if there's anything that you need, any questions, you can comment. Be sure to follow us, or, you know, and like our page. And so you'll get those updates when we're streaming live. And thank you so much for your time. Have a great week.